Design factor, factor of safety, and reliability. Three terms, and they are all trying to answer the same problem every engineer runs into. You don't know the exact load a part will see out in the field. You don't know the exact strength of the material you got from the mill. And you have no way of predicting exactly how 10 years of fatigue, corrosion, and ordinary abuse will wear a part down. These three factors are how engineers put an actual number on all that uncertainty instead of just guessing at it. In this episode, we look at what each one actually measures, when you reach for one over the other, and how each one gets calculated. So, say a product you designed turns out to be defective, and that defect causes harm. In the US, if the part that shipped came off the line different from its own design specification, that's called a manufacturing defect, your company can be held liable for it regardless of how careful anyone was. Nobody has to prove negligence, just that the defect existed and that it caused the harm. That liability isn't permanent though. Most states put a hard cutoff on it, commonly somewhere in the 10 to 12 year range from when the product first shipped. Now over in the EU, part of that rule flips completely. If the technology at the time genuinely couldn't have caught the defect, the manufacturer isn't liable. That's called the development risk defense. So in the EU, whether you could have known about the defect becomes the deciding factor, the opposite of how the US treats manufacturing defects. Europe's standard cutoff also runs about 10 years, and a newer EU directive adopted in 2024 extends that to 25 years when an injury takes decades to actually show up. So you've got roughly the same baseline time frame on both sides of the Atlantic, but two opposite answers to the same question. The US doesn't ask whether the defect could have been known. The EU does. Now, a tangent here. Design defects get judged differently. Courts usually ask whether a safer alternative design was feasible or not. A manufacturing defect is different from a design defect, and the distinction matters. A manufacturing defect is when one part or one batch comes out different from its own blueprint. Say a bolt machined half a millimeter thinner than the drawing calls for, or a weld with a hidden void because of contamination that day. The design itself was fine. This particular part just didn't match it. A design defect is the opposite situation. Every unit is exactly built to specification with nothing wrong in manufacturing, but the spec itself was unsafe to begin with. A bracket that's simply too thin for the loads it's rated for, built perfectly and still fails, that's a design defect. So back to safety factors and reliability. These three factors exist to cover any gap between what you assumed at the design stage and what the part actually faces once it's out in the field. And that gap has more than one source. It can come from a manufacturing defect. It can also come from ordinary variation in material properties, batch to batch, or from loads out in the field running higher than anything you planned for. Neither of those last two is a defect. They are just normal uncertainty. So the real question an engineer has to answer long before any of this reaches a courtroom is not does this part work, but does it keep working with no defects years after it left your hands under conditions you can't predict? And that's actually why design factor, factor of safety, and reliability exist in engineering practice. There are two broad ways an engineer can handle that kind of uncertainty. And uncertainty actually is the starting point for all of this. In any real design, you are working with unknowns everywhere. Material composition varies, and even within a single bar of stock, properties can differ from one point to the next. Processes like welding, shrink fits, or heat treatment done nearby can shift a material's properties in ways that are hard to pin down exactly. Loads aren't constant either in how strong they are or how they are distributed. Even your mathematical model of the part is only an approximation of the real thing, not the real thing itself. Add in stress concentrations, the effect of time on strength, corrosion, and wear, and you get a long list of things you simply cannot know for certain. There is even some uncertainty about whether that list is complete. So the real question is not how to remove the uncertainty, because you can't. It's how do you build something that survives it anyway. Now, the first way of answering that is deterministic. You take a single fixed number for strength, usually a minimum or typical value, and a single fixed number for the maximum stress you expect the part to see. Then you divide the strength number by the stress number. You do that because the results tell you directly how many times stronger the part is than what it actually needs to withstand. For example, a ratio of 3 means the part can take 3 times the stress you expect before anything fails. That ratio chosen up front at the design stage is your design factor. Engineers sometimes call this the factor of ignorance, not because the engineering is careless, but because that single number is standing in for everything you genuinely can't predict. A material flow you didn't catch, a load nobody planned for, a use case outside specification, and so on. If you want a part to handle twice the load you expected to see, you design it with a factor of 2. That number is quietly doing the job of covering every unknown you couldn't calculate directly. But once a part is actually built, using a real stock instead of the exact theoretical number your calculation produced, that ratio often shifts. Say your calculation tells you that you need a bar of 14.3 millimeters thick, and standard stock doesn't come in exactly that size, so you buy the next size up, a 16 millimeter bar, because that's what's actually available off the shelf. Nothing about the design itself changed, but the part you actually built is stronger than what you originally targeted. If your design factor going in was 3, the actual ratio you end up with, now called this factor of safety, comes out to about 3.7. Same definition, the same math, just measured at 2 different points in time. One is your target before the fact, the other is your reality after it. Now, reliability comes from the second way of handling uncertainty, and this one treats strength and stress as ranges of possible values instead of single numbers. You sometimes hear this called a stochastic or statistical approach. Both point at the same thing. Rather than picking one worst-case number, you define both strength and stress as full distributions, usually a normal distribution or bell curve, with a mean and a standard deviation. And as a quick reminder, the standard deviation is just an average measure for the size of deviations from the average mean value. Once you have those two distributions, you can calculate reliability directly, which is defined as the probability that the part will do its job without failing for a specified period of time under stated conditions. That's a different kind of calculation from design factor or factor of safety, right? It's a probability worked out from 2 entire distributions of possible values, and it's usually expressed either as a percentage or as a decimal between 0 and 1, like 96% or 0.96. Remember, in reality, strength and stress are both spread out over a range of values, not fixed points. And there is always some chance the margin between them dips below 0, no matter how far apart you push the averages. Typically, we have strength values as a normal curve and a stress value as another. Each curve has thin tails stretching out on both sides, and even when the two curves sit far apart on average, those tails can still overlap slightly. The low end of the strength curve reaching down toward the high end of the stress curve. And that sliver of overlap, however small, is where failure can occur, because it's where strength drops below stress. And your job as the designer is to keep that sliver, that chance of failure, below whatever target your reliability goal sets. Now, let's tie everything together. These two methods aren't separate systems sitting side by side. They are linked. A higher design factor actually pushes the strength curve and the stress curve further apart from each other. And the further apart those curves sit, the less their tails overlap. And the less they overlap, the higher your reliability actually is. Again, note that design factor, factor of safety, and reliability are all answers to the same underlying problem. You can never know the exact strength of a part or the exact load it will face, but you still have to decide with an actual number whether it's safe enough to build. Design factor is your target ratio before the part exists. Factor of safety is that same ratio measured after it's actually built, and reliability is the probability version of the same idea calculated from full distributions instead of single numbers. So why keep both methods around instead of just always using the more precise one? Because they serve different jobs. Factor of safety is fast, and it's what you reach for in routine design, in small production runs, or whenever a code like ASME or ISO already specifies the factor you are required to use. You are not calculating risk from scratch there. You are following an established standard, and that's the right call when there isn't time or data for a full statistical study. Reliability is worth the extra work when the stakes are higher, like mass-produced parts, where even a small reduction in material adds up to real savings across millions of units, or critical systems like aircraft components and medical devices, where the consequence of failure is severe enough that you need the actual odds, sometimes something like 1 in a million, not just a ratio that feels safe. Now let's look at how each one actually gets used in an example. A round steel bar, its strength has a mean of 660 megapascals with a standard deviation of 45. It's going to carry an average actual load of 290 kilonewtons with a standard deviation of 22. Both strength and load follow a normal distribution, and we are told to use a design factor of 1.2. And we need to find the bar's diameter and its reliability given this information, right? Let's solve this step by step. First, open a spreadsheet. Quick tip, just go to your browser and type sheet.new. Now let's bring the inputs, our known values. We have strength average and strength standard deviation. We have the load as average and standard deviation. Then we have the design factor, DF. What we need to find is the bar diameter and the reliability for this given situation. What we do first, we can find the average allowable stress, sigma average, because remember, by definition, the design factor tells you how much stronger the material needs to be than the stress you are planning to apply. So we find the allowable stress, allowable average stress by dividing the mean strength by the design factor, right? So here we go, 660 divided by this, and this is the allowable, the average allowable stress, right? Sigma average. Then, knowing the stress and load, what we can do, we can find the bar's size, the diameter here. Since the stress is simply just the load divided by area, we find the required cross-sectional area by dividing the mean load by that allowable stress. And this divided by this. Make sure you use the compatible units, right? With megapascals, dimensions can be in millimeters, but loads should be in Newton, not kilonewtons. Make sure they are consistent here. Then divided by this, square millimeters in area, and then from that area, the diameter works out to just under this much. Then we round it up to let's say 26, assuming the next available standard size in the market is this. Then from there we can work out the factor of safety, because the actual sigma is now different since we chose a different bar diameter, and the actual stress, sigma, will be less than the design stress, right? And factor of safety becomes the strengths, the average strength divided by the average actual stress. Then to find reliability, we still need to find the variation in the applied stress, right? The diameter is now fixed, so any variation in the load translates directly into variation in the stress. We get that by dividing the load's standard deviation by the area, right? And that's this divided by this, which gives us the stress variation, right, in megapascals. And from there, we now can work out the safety margin. That's just strength minus stress. The average margin is difference between average values, right? This one minus this one. But remember, the margin now has also its own variation, and to calculate its variation, because both strength and stress vary independently, we combine their variation, their standard deviations, by squaring each one first and then adding them together and taking the square root. That's called the root sum square method, or RSS. We square the deviations first because simply adding them directly would probably let positive and negative differences cancel out to zero, right? Which would completely hide the real scatter and deviations. So squaring keeps everything positive and gives more weight to the larger outliers. Then once we have added the squares together, we are left with a variance, which is now in squared units and hard to interpret physically. So we take the square root to bring it back to the original units of stress and strength, right? Which is megapascal. And now we can find reliability. The part fails whenever the stress ends up higher than the strength, right? Which is the same as saying the part fails whenever the margin drops below zero. To find how likely that is, we calculate a z-score, or also called sigma score, which tells us how many standard deviations a given value sits away from the mean, right? So what we want to know here is how many standard deviations zero is from our average margin. That's 0 minus divided by. Now we can look that value up in a standard normal probability table, or in our spreadsheet we use the normal distribution function here, which actually gives a failure probability of just under 4%. If you are not familiar how this works, we had an earlier episode on normal curve which explained the foundations of how to work with standard deviation and z-scores and figure the probabilities. So failure probability is about 4%. Now reliability is just probability of success, right? Which is the opposite of failure. And so the probability of success is 100% minus that failure probability. So we end up at just about 96%. Again, for a refresher on what is probability and what are key probability rules, check out our statistics series here.